with the storytelling. Bit of a change of tack now from hyper growth to sort of thinking about hyperscalers, and from my perspective as a lawyer, kind of how you negotiate and structure deals with hyperscalers and what we're seeing in terms of kind of moves in the market at the moment. It's a big topic to cover for 20 minutes, so I was trying to think what's going to be the most helpful sort of area that we can focus on for the audience. So what I'm going to try and achieve, and there'll be a little bit of storytelling in there, is to just give a view around sort of demystifying the process with hyperscalers, and also kind of giving a view on the art of the possible with hyperscalers, and also a little bit of the art of the not possible as well. So if we kind of think about what does the term hyperscaler and hyperscaler deals mean? So up on the slides, we've kind of got various different logos. It's essentially the large cloud service providers, a number of the big kind of global IT companies that provide kind of cloud and SaaS solutions on a sort of a one to many thousand basis, as well as a number of the big ERP providers as well. There's various other businesses on there as well, so it's certainly not an exhaustive list. And then if we think about kind of some of the scale and spectrum of hyperscale deals that we're seeing in the market at the moment, over on the left-hand side of the slides, we've got your kind of usual commodity cloud and SaaS deals. And then as we kind of move across the value chain, moving to the right-hand side, it's very much looking more at obviously higher value, more significant business critical deals, but also thinking about kind of combining cloud transformation. And certainly something that we're seeing more of a shift in the market is around real kind of sort of business partnering between hyperscalers and their clients. So that could involve elements of cloud transformation, technology transformation within the organization, but also kind of sort of building revenue streams together. So that might be joint go-to-market opportunities, kind of platform opportunities. And I've got a couple of examples that I can speak to with some of those kind of sort of slightly more innovative deal structures that we're seeing at the moment. So I'm sure many in the audience have kind of negotiated with hyperscalers before. Some may even work for the hyperscalers as well. They're certainly a kind of a different beast, and some of the kind of normal rules of the sourcing process, the procurement process, don't always apply to the hyperscalers. And I think kind of going into that, recognizing that there is a difference, means that you're not going to be disappointed, and also you'll be able to kind of manage stakeholders internally in terms of expectations, what you can, what you can't agree to. It's also just worth thinking about some of the kind of the structural challenges that the hyperscalers themselves face. So generally they're very large organizations with very kind of set, controlled processes. Even if you've got the most kind of sort of creative, innovative people within those organizations, actually they often can't change some of the structures, can't change some of the processes. So as many customer organizations, particularly if you're sort of used to doing outsourcing deals, especially if you've got kind of leverage and there's a process, you might be used to getting your own way. You might be looking for kind of sort of bespoke things that are created for you. Within the hyperscaler world, that's certainly much less achievable, and you kind of need to really sort of reflect on the fact that actually you're going to need to work with some of their processes and structures in order to kind of get a deal that works. That plays through from a kind of a legal contracting perspective, obviously very standardized, particularly down the more kind of commoditized side of the market. And there's only kind of limited levers that you can pull to sort of influence changes to the commercials and the contracting process. But it's one of those things where, like with all things in life, if you kind of know the right people, if you can access the right people within those organizations, actually you can kind of drive a bit of creativity, a bit of innovation, and that's certainly something that we're seeing kind of coming to the forefront of the market now. But I think it's worth kind of level setting when you're going into these sorts of deals with the hyperscalers and the sort of the negotiation leverage that you're expecting. kind of take it down a few notches, you're not going to be able to achieve the sort of the usual things that you might expect. So it's sort of worth just understanding that level setting piece at the outset. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are some kind of silver linings, and there are levers that you can pull as well to kind of help engineer some exciting and innovative deals. And I think here you kind of have to put yourself a little bit in the mindset of some of the hyperscalers and what they're looking to achieve. So the levers that we kind of see that can sort of influence deal shape, deal type, obviously there's a huge focus on kind of what revenue are you going to commit, particularly for kind of cloud services and some of their core offerings. Being quite frank, if you're spending some quite chunky amounts of money, that can always help. And those kind of sort of core commitments often form a bedrock of the discussions. But it's not only about cash and those commitments. Also, if you're kind of creating a kind of a platform opportunity or a new market or revenue opportunity for the hyperscalers, that can also be really convincing and actually enable you to kind of move the dial in terms of the discussions there. And if I think about a couple of deals that I've just been supporting on recently and kind of going back to this storytelling idea, one of the deals that we're helping on at the moment is with an African telco. They're doing a couple of very large hyperscale deals with two of the well-known hyperscalers. Slightly chaotic African client that we're sort of navigating all of the politics and kind of cultural excitement that goes with that. But for the hyperscalers themselves, actually, it's a brilliant revenue opportunity for them for a new market where they don't have that much penetration yet. So they're kind of looking at it as a new market platform play. If they can be a little bit more flexible in terms of some of their commercial terms, some of their processes, actually it's going to enable them to sell more kind of core products and services in the African region. And that's certainly something where there's kind of a core cloud component to it, and the hyperscalers are helping them on the cloud journey and helping them transform. But also there's a really strong go-to-market element. So they're kind of looking at how they jointly sell each other's products and services, how they can embed each other's product services within their organizations. And it's that sort of revenue creation opportunity that's actually meant that when we kind of look at the legal and commercial terms that we're negotiating, they're perhaps kind of less vanilla hyperscaler and almost moving along the spectrum to the sort of terms that you might see in an outsourcing deal. And one other example, kind of different sector, different region, we're doing a sort of a very high value one for FS client at the moment. Again, for the hyperscaler involved, it's a kind of a new market opportunity to them, particularly in the capital market space. They're sort of not as well known in that area. They've kind of recognized this platform opportunity, and if they can have a really kind of key anchor client that they can leverage, that they can do press releases with, they can do case studies with, they see the value in kind of creating revenue opportunity for them. So that's something, again, where it's helpful that there's some large kind of cloud commitments. As I said, spend often is a foundation element to this, but it's all the kind of the bells and whistles, the joint go-to-market, the marketing, the sort of the platform opportunity that's meaning, again, we're able to negotiate some quite kind of unique and creative terms that you perhaps wouldn't see within your standard cloud deals. And just for the last section, as I'm a lawyer, I've got to go into some of the detail for you because otherwise you kind of won't be feeling that you're getting your money's worth. But I thought I'd just spotlight kind of a few areas for those that perhaps get involved in the kind of the contract negotiations, commercial negotiations, what you kind of can achieve, what you can't achieve, and again, some of the sort of the art of the possible here. So one of the really interesting areas and probably the most hotly negotiated piece is around those commitments and what level of flexibility you get in relation to the commitments. And particularly if you've got a hyperscaler that is sort of helping you along that cloud transformation journey, or they might be bringing in an SI that's going to be kind of helping you along that cloud transformation journey. How does what they deliver and what they create translate to your ability to hit those commitments? And often for organisations, they're signing up to kind of quite scary commitments, but there's a high degree of kind of linkage and dependency on the hyperscaler or the SIs in terms of kind of enabling them to meet those commitments. From a hyperscaler perspective, it's a really challenging area because it impacts revenue recognition. It personally impacts kind of commercials of the sales team and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of vested interest in terms of where you land. But we're certainly starting to see movement where there is that kind of linkage. So there's a sort of recognition that if the hyperscalers are going to move into this space of doing kind of business partnering, technology transformation, actually some of their cloud commitment is going to need to be kind of linked to those delivery commitments. So we're seeing a bit of flex for customers to proportionally reduce or have a bit more time to kind of make up those commitments. So that's kind of one theme in the commercial space. One area where there's sort of a lot less flexibility is just the fact that variation to the services, to the terms, service levels, etc., across the suite of hyperscalers is just something that they can do and they can kind of sort of change unilaterally. And particularly for kind of sort of customer organisations, that puts you in a bit of an uncomfortable space because you sort of spend all this time and effort negotiating a deal and then they can sort of change everything by updating some terms on a portal somewhere. Again, this is an area where actually you really don't have that much latitude because of the nature of the hyperscalers. It's something that you just need to kind of work with, risk manage. You can agree some protection, so you can get some notice. You can kind of get protections that they're not going to sort of materially degrade the services or materially degrade the terms. And ultimately, you might be able to get some sort of termination right or potentially exit assistance if they kind of sort of do something that's going to be really adverse for you. The reality is, because they work on a one-to-many thousand basis, they're never going to change things that are going to adversely impact customers. So there's a lot of kind of risk mitigation, risk acceptance that you can just accept from the fact that they've got to be market competitive for their customers. Couple of other areas that are sort of hot topics for debate as well, and again, particularly customer organisations get a little bit vexed at. One is sort of suspension of services. Again, a kind of a core principle with a lot of the hyperscale services is that they need that ability to suspend or pull the services, because if there's a security threat or some kind of cyber incident, they obviously don't want to kind of contaminate issues for multiple customers, so they need to kind of sort of bring things down quickly. Again, for a kind of a customer organisation or even a supplier organisation within the supply chain supporting customers, puts you in a really difficult position because all your business critical services are down. How are you going to support your customers? How are you going to support clients and customers if you're a supplier? Again, you can put some kind of protection measures in there contractually, so you can get some notice periods, you can get a bit of kind of escalation and governance so that there's at least a conversation before these sorts of things happen. Again, you can kind of really narrow the circumstances when it may apply, but ultimately it's something that you just need to kind of get comfortable with. It's a sort of risk acceptance piece as part of doing deals with hyperscalers. Last kind of couple of topics to unpack and explore as well. From a termination perspective, lawyers always get really excited about termination and shortly liability as well. Within the outsourcing world, you tend to see kind of quite favourable terms to customers and not as much mutuality for suppliers. Within the hyperscale kind of matrix, there's definitely a lot more mutuality. There's kind of a number of situations where hyperscalers will expect to have termination rights and you can't really negotiate those away. So again, it's kind of thinking about, if you're a customer organisation or a supplier within the supply chain, how do we manage that risk? What can we do? Again, longer notice periods, perhaps kind of having some kind of commercial mechanisms to sort of incentivise against termination. And for customer organisations, particularly if they're regulated, thinking about that kind of exit assistance and support and those sorts of mechanisms that you can build into the contracts. And certainly if you're in the FS space and certain other regulated sectors, a lot of the hyperscalers offer a kind of bespoke set of terms that you can benefit from that give you exit assistance and audit rights and all the things that you need to do to kind of show to your regulators that you're compliant. And then the final piece, just kind of looking at liability and remedies. Again, your sort of usual spectrum of contractual remedies that you'd expect to have in, say, an outsourcing deal or a big sourcing deal don't always apply in the hyperscale space. You've got to kind of manage your expectations and recognise that you're going to have a sort of more limited set of levers. But again, money counts. If you're spending more, you can certainly get kind of better, more progressive liability regimes. So you'll see hyperscalers signing up to super caps for sort of data protection breaches, kind of more consistent with what you see in the outsourcing market. You can potentially negotiate some of the nasties like service levels and service credits being a sole and exclusive remedy. Perhaps they're just a sole remedy until you terminate. You can also usually kind of sort of work in some escalation and governance processes so that there's kind of a bit more oversight, a bit more conversation with the hyperscalers so that you can sort of practically manage them. And certainly if they're using SIs within their kind of stack of suppliers and depending on the project, there's a little bit more flex sometimes to negotiate more progressive terms there because they will ultimately kind of look to sort of back those with the SI in question. So that's a quick kind of tour de force of hyperscaler deals. It's certainly something where, as I said, we're seeing quite a lot of innovation and growth and a bit of change of kind of mindset. And certainly the kind of the deals of the future within the sourcing space are going to have much more of a hyperscale kind of cloud partnering sort of component to them. So I think it's just recognizing that this is one of the sort of the exciting shifts that we're seeing. And that's everything from me, unless anybody's got any questions at all.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony. So it doesn't look like GSA standard terms are quite ready for the hyperscalers yet. So, right, I'm going to ask, has anybody got any questions? Oh, we've got two questions. So Terry and then Hemant.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's good to hear that there's some flexibility creeping in. My experience of working with hyperscalers is it's a very different relationship than a normal supplier-customer relationship because they kind of don't care. In a normal relationship, the provider wants your business and the customer wants to buy something, and that kind of symbiotic relationship means that there's some preparedness, shall we say, to come to a comfortable place, which just hasn't existed, I don't think, with the hyperscalers in the past. It's like, if you don't accept our terms, go away, we don't care, we've got other customers queuing up to take our services. So it's good that it's creeping in, but that's a statement, not a question. The question is, just thinking about what we talked about yesterday with GSA standard terms and the stuff David talked about, and having a platform that allows you to just focus on the 5 or 6 clauses in a contract that really are negotiable. Is it possible for you to take what you've just shared in terms of these are the 4 or 5 things that can be negotiated in certain circumstances and turn those into something that could be shared with the community, shared with the GSA in terms of standard terms, so people know not just that there is potential to negotiate some clauses, but actually what are the ones that there's some movement on, and where have we seen the movement to make it easier for people to contract?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly kind of sort of sharing that know-how is a kind of key part of the ethos of the GSA and those within the community. It was interesting what you're saying about kind of the hyperscalers don't care. Even if you're sort of spending hundreds of millions, actually they don't really care, and it's only when you're sort of starting to spend a few billion or multiple billion, suddenly you're kind of their best friend and they do care. But as I said, it sort of depends on the kind of the market opportunity, the platform opportunity. With this particular African deal that we've been doing, they just see it as a gateway to Africa. So even though the deal value is not as high as some of the other ones that we see, some really flexible terms because they sort of see that gateway opportunity. It does change a little bit hyperscaler to hyperscaler as to what you can agree. I was sort of generalising for effect, but it's kind of a little bit more nuanced depending on who you're dealing with. But certainly there's kind of probably 5 or 6 key themes that they're sort of starting to join conventional wisdom and offer some sort of more moderated terms that are a little bit more acceptable. But equally, if it's a kind of commoditized SaaS service, no spend, etc., sometimes you just need to get with the program and you accept their online terms and just get on with it. So it's sort of knowing a little bit when to pick your battles as well.
Thank you. Hemant, yeah.
I think you know what I'm going to ask about. What ESG elements are there in the contracts that you typically deal with your clients? What do they ask for? What do vendors offer? Is there a match? Are the gaps too big? Is that part of your negotiation? How does it play out? Just give us some color about that.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting and vibrant area at the moment, and it's certainly something where the market norms are shifting in that space. Lots of kind of customers are coming up with kind of quite creative ideas as to what they want contractually. Some of them are a bit aggressive in terms of what their expectations are. With a number of the large hyperscalers, ESG is obviously a huge focus for them within their organisation. So there's a lot that they can actually kind of rebadge anyway to kind of show that they're supporting ESG commitments that the customer might be looking for. So a lot of them already have kind of net zero targets, or they might be signing up to science-based targets or other things. We have seen some kind of creative measures. So for example, within the data center space with hyperscalers, there's a lot of focus on how much renewable energy versus kind of non-renewable is used within the mix, and you'll sort of see specific metrics that track that, so that kind of customer organizations or hyperscalers, when they're working with DC operators, have kind of got the assurance that actually it is going to be sort of more renewable or generally renewable mix. So still a bit light and fluffy ultimately in terms of where we are currently, but there's definitely a shift to kind of some more concrete metrics. And there's a really interesting community, the Chancery Lane project, which is sort of a bunch of lawyers that have all come together and are sharing ideas and clauses around ESG. So I'd kind of encourage people to look at that particular resource. It's got some really good thinking there. We've been part of some of the pilots for sort of developing some clauses within the sort of the sourcing space.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony. We did actually have a session on the Chancery Lane project yesterday, so so it's great work that they're doing. Right, we're slightly changing the agenda and we're going to go in for a coffee break now. So we're going to have a coffee break, and then 15 minutes time we'll come back and do the destination showcase with Elena from Ukraine opening that up. So have a coffee break and we'll see you shortly. Enjoy the sun for a bit as well.